How such stuff as dreams are made on, and our little life is rounded with a sleep. Welcome to this week's edition of the Lowdown on Lower Decks. Show. Bienvenidos a todos nuestros amables oyentes. Guten Morgen, everyone. I am Chris Pavon, and it is my extreme pleasure to welcome you to a very dreamy episode of Lower Decks, Mining the Mind's Minds. And I am not alone in this recap of a very dreamy episode, because I am joined as ever with my invaluable co-host, Joss.
Good morning, Nuknech! Greetings to all starships in the Alpha, Beta, Gamma, and Delta quadrants. I'm Josh Pritchett, film reviewer for Movers and Shakers, and also writer and occasional artist. Chris, how are you doing this week?
I'm doing fine, Josh, and I must say that watching this episode, and we'll talk about this more, harkened me back to the days of Fantasy Island, both the old show in the 70s and a brief shout out to the show that is currently going on right now on Fox Network.
Yeah, I mean, there is that, and I mean, I tend to think a little bit more in terms of Shore Leave from the original Star Trek series. Uh, with I think that the the idea of fantasies coming to life was definitely a classic series idea, and I mean the fact that, and we'll get into this in the review, but I don't want to get too ahead, but the way our heroes looked at it, it's like, yeah, going to a planet where your fantasies come to life is now standard operating procedure because Starfleet's been around for 200 years and we've found more than one planet that does this. But the fact is, even though, yeah, then maybe they have, as we'll see, they really did have a very fresh and exciting take on that theme. So what did you think of it?
Well, I thought the timing of the release of this episode, whether planned or not, was actually quite ideal because for many of our viewers out there, this starts the fantasy season in fantasy football. So a shout out to the members of my league. I look forward to whoever of you finish second behind me, and also much success to all of our viewers who have their own fantasy leagues that start today.
Yes. Okay. Welcome to all our friends who may your may fortune favor you. May the great rivers of fortune carry you to profit, as the Grand
Indeed.
Nagus would say.
So with that, let's get started on our recap of the episode. Which let me get us set the scene. Which is a planet where you see a lone, well, assuming he's a scientist, and he notices a glowing rock. And as soon as he gets near the rock, all of a sudden he sees his seventh grade geology teacher in a very revealing toga, and she says, "Come here and why don't you tell me about your racing novel?" And he's like, "Oh my God, I've never heard anything about, I've never told anyone about my racing novel. Like, I will be like, the main protagonist." And then he turns to stone. Um, and you see who we assume is an inhabitant of the planet, just like looking at what's happening. And then we later find out that the planet in question is Gengis 4. And the person who is watching him, the inhabitant, is called, he's a silicate creature, part of the Scrubble. And we see a shot of two California class Star class ships, and we see the USS Hood, who, as many of you remember, has many mentions throughout Trek lore, and they have come to arrange a peace agreement between the inhabitants and the Starfleet scientists, so that they don't continue to be turned into stone, which is a reference to Medusa and her mythology. And then we find out that the other California class ship is the Carlsbad, And then we shift to a scene where Ransom is goes off on why do these scientists do what they do? Why are they always, and I quote, getting eaten, disappearing, or having eggs placed in their chest? And why can't they just join Starfleet instead of trying to like go and study spores and get devoured by plants? So you see a real bias from Ransom as a Starfleet official towards like the scientists. And it's determined that a joint effort from both ships will go down to the planet to help disassemble the station and take all the mines and put them away for safety. And meanwhile, the captains are both going to jointly host the inhabitants and the Federation scientists on their ship. Josh, do you want to take it from there?
Yeah, thank you, Chris. So the captains of the Carlsbad and, of course, Captain Freeman of the Cerritos are completing negotiations with the between the scientists and the aliens that live on the planet. At this time, Tendi will be joining in because the acting science officer, because as we found out in a previous episode, Tendi is now science officer in training. We find out that her mentor is, you know, I can't remember his name right now, the green bird creature. And of course, he's not taking it very seriously. But he's urging her to be the voice of science, get Captain Freeman to take this seriously. Meanwhile, the rest of our heroes, Beckett and Boimler, and have all headed on down to the planet, along with some incidents from the Carlsbad. And there gets to be kind of a rivalry there, as the incidents from the Carlsbad are trying to disassemble the science base, and Mariner and the rest and our heroes are picking up the fantasy rocks. And of course, hilarity ensues when they start seeing little fantasies, and because, as you said earlier, they're trying to ignore them and trying to do their work. Uh, you know, so Boimler gets an offer to rush off to go fight the Borg and become a captain. That he's finally getting to be the hero. Beckett picks on him because he's going to be picked up in this motorcycle sidecar, and it's like, dude, you're even in your fantasies, you're in the sidecar. And he's like, yeah, but I'm not a natural driver. And we see a cameo by an old friend, Dr. Leah Thompson, who we might remember from the TNG third season episode Booby Trap, where a hologram of her helped Geordi find a way to escape this trap that the Enterprise D was captured in. Mariner is seeing our friend Jennifer, the Andorian, in rather sexy poses, and we now find out that apparently Mariner has a thing for Jennifer. So suddenly the fantasies become hostile, because they get tipped over. And the fantasy rocks that essentially they're putting them in the containers. The containers knocked over. They all start coming out, and they've all become nightmares. And one of the people from the Carlsbad, apparently his fear is a giant snake that's also a Borg. Then we see Jennifer turns into a werewolf, which, let's face it, who hasn't had that problem with a romantic partner that they suddenly turn into a were creature? It's normal. And they also see, wait for it, killer Klingon clouds. Oh my! So they run to hide in a cave, and meanwhile, negotiations aboard the Cerritos are not going as planned. Chris, you want to take it from there?
Thank you, Josh. So the negotiations are like going swiftly sour in an exchange between old school and new school, and the it might have gone south completely if not for Tandy, who, after a prep talk from the doctor, goes into the negotiations and happens to be there at the same time when the members of the away crew, this being Boimler and goes up to the meeting room, because what happens on the planet is that they manage to lock themselves in a cave, and from the dreams turn nightmares, and then they find an energy signal, and it turns out that they find a door, and behind the door there's all this apparatus, and they realize that it's some kind of technology that's being used to read their minds and store the information. So then they realize, this is not an accident, and so they go outside and they step up and they face their fears and they manage to overcome them. And then they come back up to the ship and they're trying to tell them, like, listen, everything is not as it seems. And there's all this shouting back and forth. And Jax is saying, like, I'm having like flashbacks, until Tandy manages to break through because she breaks the rock, because the whole impetus of the conflict is this rock that these Skrullians want to give to the Federation, and they, each one of them really doesn't want the rock. And Tandy breaks it, and Captain Freeman's like, "What are you doing?" And there's a device inside the rock, and that's when they hear Mariner and Boimler when they're talking about this apparatus that they found down on the planet, and they realize, holy cow, they wanted to plant that in the offices, in the ready rooms of one of the captains, and then that would allow them access to all types of, like, high level information that they could like sell to the highest bidder. And at this point, they're like, the scientists and the Skrullians are revealed to be working together, and they're like, "Oh, maybe we just go back down to the planet right now." But no, they're stopped, and so you then have a forward where Captain Ransom is talking about how they discovered like this was a ruse, and they're going to dismantle the intelligence gathering equipment, and that she has ordered, along with the other captain of the California class captain, that they have a moment together between both crews to celebrate stopping this. And you see a moment where the people who are down on the planet are now at the bar, and they're really admitting like how much they admire the people on the Cerritos, about how they've heard that they're sort of like the Enterprise of the California class, and how they have all lived up to the legends that they have, that Tendy's like a ray of sunshine, and that they each have an interpretation outside of their ship that they didn't realize, and they thought it was a negative one. It turns out to be pretty positive. But of course, someone says, "But they got it wrong with Boimler," and Boimler's like, "Well, did they think I was like like this really determined, like intelligent person?" And they're like, "No, most of the time they think that you're like a humorous droid." And he's like, "But I'm not a droid." And then they begin to make fun of him, and see.
Yeah, and that wraps up another great episode of Lower Decks. And I am really excited that I got to finally say killer Klingon clowns, Chris. I gotta tell you. And yes, that is my next cosplay, by the way. So yes, something new for your you'll have to look forward to taking pictures of me at Farpoint. So okay, so now we're going to get into the good, the bad, and the Gorn. There are no killer Gorn clowns, by the way. At least not this show.
Not yet.
No, maybe on Strange New Worlds, but not here on Lower Decks. But yeah. Okay, so the good.
One of the themes of this episode that I really liked was the subject of perceptions, of how we view ourselves and how other people view us. And how a lot of times we can emphasize, because we are the most critical of ourselves. So we take that and we transfer that to other people, thinking, oh, they must be equally, if not more, critical of us. And I loved how at the start of the episode, there's some antagonism between the members of the away crew of the Cerritos and of the Carlsbad, that they each think they're in competition with one another. And then when they get, by circumstances, put into the cave, hiding out from their hostile dreams, it's revealed that no, I mean, we actually like you guys. I mean, like, we're in awe of you guys. Like, your exploits are like, the subject of legends throughout California class starships. Um, and then for the rest of the episode, you see that, yeah, that there's some camaraderie and there's some respect. And uh, I really like this talk of perceptions because, again, especially in today's society where many of us are separated through screens and we can't still get together as much in person as we used to. I mean, we can create perceptions and these can be reinforced in our minds. But oftentimes the truth is completely different. So I really liked how this episode and one of the themes focused on that.
Yeah, that was a really good twist there. That no one is actually looking down on the Cerritos crew. In fact, people are in admiration of them and sort of wish they could be more like them. I agree. It's clear that the Carlsbad crew, that maybe they're a little bit more disciplined, but it's like, God, you guys are so awesome with the stuff you've been doing. Everybody's heard about it around the fleet. You've done all these crazy Enterprise and Voyager level type of stuff. And it goes back to something though that I was, I've been thinking about for the past couple seasons, that this show focuses not on the command crew, although they're part of it. This is primarily about the ensigns. This is probably the guys, the blue collar guys that are actually making things happen on the Cerritos. And if you go back to the first season, they're talking about the most important man in Starfleet history is Miles Edward O'Brien. Uh, yeah, it makes sense that these are the people you want to focus on. Um, so I'm glad we had that. Um, I thought it was very interesting getting to, I thought it was really interesting how they got into their fantasies. Uh, obviously certain things like Boiler, we all know he wants to be a starship captain. He wants to prove that he could take on the Borg. And as we saw last season, when he was in that simulator, and he actually exceeded all expectations. Uh, because he continued to get pushing his numbers up and up. Because yeah, he's a very determined guy, but he's just looking for that chance to really prove himself, that opportunity. Um, and I like that kind of competition though between old school and new school. There's Freeman taking on the Carlsbad captain. You know, basically, them kind of this rivalry, and it got obviously pretty heated. But we found out that it was because of the device in the rock that was doing it to them. Um,
I mean, there were a lot of riffs, as you point out, in this episode that I don't think it's a bad thing to explore, such as when Ransom is going off about the scientists, about like, why can't they just be Starfleet officers? Like, why can't they just like, be part of a structure? Because they view the scientists as like being outside of their structure of command and always getting into problems, probably because they don't have the structure of Starfleet. And so they're considered part of Starfleet, yet they're really not. I also liked we had the conflict of what constitutes a mentor, a good mentor, and what doesn't. And clearly, we see that with the ship's counselor, who is the assigned mentor for Tandy. But he's really kind of full of himself, and he's quite honestly not very helpful. So what does Tandy do? Tandy goes to the person that she sees as a mentor figure, and it pays off because in the midst of a very funny sequence in which he is about to conduct some kind of brutal operation on someone, she says, "Okay, we're doing this now," and she gives her the boost of confidence that she needs, and so it reminds me of many like even going back to my college days. When you are assigned a mentor or like a member of the faculty versus the person that you perceive is really your mentor. So there's a lot of conflicts in this episode that brings to light a lot of things that perhaps we don't initially think of. But I really liked it. And again, the conflict between Starfleet officers and scientists, where in this episode we see actually the scientists have gone rogue against Starfleet. And then we see the idea of like, what constitutes like a mentor, and it's the assigned mentor versus the person, he, she, or they, that you actually consider to be a mentor. And this can happen in offices, this can happen in universities, and like any part of a large grouping of people where there's a structure.
I want to build off what you were talking about with the scientists, whether they
Hmm.
should or should not be in Starfleet. Obviously, you kind of have to have a mix. Um, just last week, I rewatched Wrath of Khan in the theater, um, and of course, you have the whole thing with Carol Marcus and her son David Marcus, who's also the son of Captain Kirk, and how he resents the more militaristic side of Starfleet, that he sees it as the military, even though they're explorers, they're not the same thing as colonial powers type of thing. And you do have those scientists that are like, okay, they're the free thinkers, that they don't function in a structure very well. So obviously they're Starfleet is not going to appeal to them. But then you have other scientists like Spock, who's a very good scientist, but he chooses to function within the realm of Starfleet because he knows they're going to be out there, and that they need somebody who is a voice of reason and the voice of science, uh, going into this. And I think it was great that Tendi sought out advice from somebody who is obviously a lot wiser than Dr. McGillum. I'm mispronouncing that name horribly. Sorry, I just too many vowels. And you know, it is because you're right. Like what you said, there's the people that are assigned to you, that you know are on paper supposed to be your mentor, and then there's the real mentor that you find for yourself, that actual teacher who's going to teach you something. And I thought that was great. um Tendi has really become such a well-rounded character over the last couple of seasons. And we really just I think she's awesome. Such a great character. And from what I've heard, on Star Trek Day, we're going to be seeing more of that going forward.
Another thing that I also liked about this episode was, and this seems to be across cultures, there are many things that we see that are very similar or equal, and the fear of clowns. It's just something that you see across literary genres, cultural genres, and now here we have clowns, as you mentioned before, with batlets on their arms. I mean, where does this universal fear of clowns come from?
Well, as a horror writer, Chris, and I'd like to field this for a moment.
Okay.
Um, Traditionally, clowns were originally not seen as buffoonish comical characters. It used to be that clowns were a disguise for assassins in medieval times. This was seen throughout Europe, and there was a variation of this in medieval Japan as well. Um, that people used to fear clowns, and then I guess it was about the 18th or 19th century that image began to change. Clowns became more of these comedic characters in European and American culture. That and obviously, you also had the image of the sad clown, but then going forward, we of course in the 1930s had probably the most famous killer clown of them all, the Joker from Batman, uh, who was, this image of a clown that was not meant to make people laugh, but was the crown clown king of crime in Gotham, as he liked to call himself. And obviously, post Adam West TV series, um, the Joker certainly became a much more darker and sinister figure. Um, and then, of course, obviously, in real life, you had John Wayne Gacy, and then what he did, and then, of course, Stephen King's It. Certainly, these have all been images over the last, I think, 40 some years that have kind of pushed the clown back into something more scary, which is in a way is unfortunate because there are a lot of people who used to love dressing up as clowns and making people laugh, and now it's become this thing again where like whether or not people are just afraid because they see clowns in horror movies like It or Attack of the Killer Clowns from Outer Space, or um, the incident we were having a few years ago where people were dressing up as creepy clowns and running up and ringing doorbells and being caught on doorbell cameras and scaring people. I think it's kind of swung back in the other direction. Um, in this traditional image of the clown as a figure of fear and horror. Um, and there's some people I think who still identify clowns as something funny and fun loving and humorous. And then there's some who, obviously, the fear of clowns is a very real phobia for a lot of people.
So the final thing I want to point out in the good before we move on to the bad and the Gorn is that, um, as viewers might remember from last week, I said that I'd hoped that we would see Jennifer the Andorian again, and we do, although not really her. Um, but we find out a little bit more that yes, either Beckett is or aspires to be in a relationship with Jennifer, and I think this is another progression of the character itself. That first you see finally under the view of Ransom beginning to accept being part of the Starfleet structure last week, and then here you see okay now she's establishing a relationship with someone that again perceptions. Let's go back to that last last season. She thought that Jennifer was antagonistic to her until she realizes that's not quite the case when she actually literally goes out onto the hull of the ship to save her. And now we see that there's a budding relationship here, and I think that's a positive for the development of the character.
Yeah, I noticed that too. That I think it's really interesting that apparently there is something, a romantic thing going on, or Beckett is hoping that wants there to be one. But also when they got to the part where they're having their nightmares, werewolf Jennifer is talking about, I want us to grow old together and grow flower beds and get really boring. And, that, and I think there's that fear of commitment that, would be so Mariner right there, that she does have that paranoia and that fear about that on the one hand, but on the other hand, she's obviously very attractive and makes the quib at one point that Jennifer's antennae are much more sensitive than that, kind of thing. And I was like, oh, do tell. Mm.
Right.
You
So
know,
yeah, it's more character development that I think is a good thing. It can't be like this. Oh, I'm just like Kirk all the time, and even Kirk developed over time. And so I think the writers are slowly bringing the character along, and I think that's a good thing. So let's move on to the bad of our segment. And I will say that I thought this was a missed opportunity to bring in some Section 31.
yeah, yeah. I mean, but I think they have to wait till there's an unexpected moment because no one ever expects Section 31. But yeah, I know, I see what you're saying, that would have been very helpful because you've got this weird kind of Federation technologies we find out that is is taking people's their fantasies and horrors, and recording them, and that's kind of scary. That sounds like something Section 31 would do.
I mean, it's definitely a surveillance technique. So, like a nod to Section 31 or something. I sort of would have liked that. I'm going to buy the argument if it is made that the chamber was heavily shielded, but you know, the Hood, the Carlsbad, the Cerritos, none of them can detect the existence of the chamber with their far more powerful sensors, and yet when they're in the cave, they can all of a sudden just with their tricorders detect the energy signature.
Yeah, I mean that is kind of a trope we find a lot throughout Star Trek. That you know you couldn't detect that. Well, I mean, having you kind of gotten to the point you're able to detect these weird energy signatures all the time, and
I mean, I'm willing to buy that it's so heavily shielded that it was meant to avoid detection from space, but somehow I guess they didn't shield the door that well, so proximity allowed the weaker tricorder to detect like the energy signature. I mean, I'm sort of willing to buy that, but I'm still kind of like, um,
yeah.
I don't know about that. But that's a very minor thing, uh, and I know they played it off for humor, but the whole thing about Jax having flashbacks. I mean, I sort of wish they hadn't done that. Because I know they're trying to mine humor, and I'm not trying to nitpick. I like the episode and I love the show, but this is a real thing for a lot of people. So I'll maybe not make that joke.
Yeah, I too, I was thinking about this in regards to a different band property thing about mental illness and things, and it really is getting to be, it's kind of it's a bad cliche, and not a very sensitive one, I think.
Yeah. Then the other thing I'd point out would be um, it's not so much bad because he's designed this way, but like, come on, get an effectual ship's counselor because the doctor whose name, the bird doctor whose name I'm not even going to try to pronounce, but you get a lot of respect from me for trying to pronounce it correctly.
Thank
Like he is so useless. I mean, yeah, do California class ships get like the useless counselors? I mean, like get
maybe.
maybe they have to okay, the A class counselors go to like like the ships like the Enterprise, but on Galaxy classes, and like okay, California class you get like the leftovers. But it's like come on, get someone who's like, I mean,
Yeah.
everyone seems has is very capable and has expertise, and maybe it's just a running joke to make fun of the ship's counselors, but this guy is so completely useless.
Oh yeah, I mean he does not empathize very well. He is a total. It's all about him. Yeah, he. I mean, I know he's on there for comic relief, but geez, come on, dude. And
I mean,
you know, it,
comic relief can be done in a clever way. Like I think the Cetacean Corpse is definitely clever comic relief. Huge fan of the Cetacean Corpse, but like him, I'm like, I think they need to transfer him and like get someone with I don't know, just a little bit. The crew of the Cerritos deserves a little bit better.
yeah, maybe send him off with the civilian scientists and everything, and he'll probably flourish. And yeah, let's get somebody. Let's get maybe somebody that might have interned with Deanna Troy.
Yeah,
Knows how
just
it's
like
done. You know.
yeah, just like someone.
Or who would be great to come back? Because we haven't mentioned her. Esri Dax.
As your dad, I mean, just if your dad, yes, just someone.
Yeah.
And so I literally just want to go into the Gorn of the episode, because for anyone who's paying close attention to when Captain Friedman is giving her final captain's log at the end of the episode, if you look towards what objects he has on her shelf, there is a Gorn action figure.
Yes.
I mean, as you and I were talking about before the show, the Gorn are just having a renaissance.
They are. Yeah. I think that, well, part of it is obviously with Lower Decks because it's an animated series they could draw them in, but I think on Strange New Worlds because it's no longer as expensive to make a Gorn costume and everything. I think and why they were never reused again in the original series I've never understood, but yeah, now it's great to have them back.
I mean, the we saw them briefly in Enterprise. We never saw them in TNG. We never saw them in Deep Space Nine. Obviously, for obvious reasons, we couldn't see them in Voyager.
Hmm.
Um, But yeah, as a personal fan of the Gorn, I am definitely enjoying the Gorn Renaissance. I am officially claiming it on the show. The term Gorn Renaissance. I am going to go see if I can like get this tagged and also trademark.
I think you should definitely go for that. And I think if you ever decide to go to the Maryland Renaissance Fair, you should wear medieval costuming with a Gorn mask. You would be
the,
so awesome.
the Gorn Renaissance is here.
And even though it's been a long time since I've gone to the Ren Fair, I do remember that there was a lot of overlap back in the day between Ren Fairs and Star Trek. So yeah, I think you would have a lot of people who would actually get that joke. You really should go for it.
Hmm. So let's move on to our final segment of the show, which is predictions for the future.
Okay.
Josh, what do you want to call?
I think that we are going to see more of this relationship between Mariner and Jennifer. Hopefully, it is going to work out. I think there's going to be some rockiness. I think Jennifer is going to want to integrate herself more with our characters and with the rest of our crew until they decide to she realizes, hey, she wants to move up and she wants Mariner to start moving up. I mean, that could be a great season finale. Does Mariner decide to buckle down and become more serious about her career because you know Jennifer's pressuring her to do this, or does she still stay the same fun-loving, adventurous Mariner Beckett that we've known for all these years? Chris, what do you got for us?
Well, 2 weeks ago, I had said that I thought we would see the evil AI back, and last week we saw an AI. It wasn't the same one that we've seen before with the incomparable Jeffrey Combs, but it was an AI. Then last week I said I thought we would see Jennifer again, and we did. I mean, not quite the real Jennifer, but definitely she had um, a strong story arc in the episode and for future episodes of the budding relationship. So my next one is I'm going to say at some point this season we will see the Gorn, and not in a tiny little action figure in the shelf of Captain Freeman, but we will see some type of interaction with the Gorn themselves.
I think that is a very safe bet because I think the Gorn Renaissance is a thing and it's
Yep.
going to keep going for a while.
You can't stop this. This train has left the station and it is just like it is moving forward.
It is at warp 9, which is
At work.
impressive for a trade.
Yeah, I definitely think so. And then the other thing I think that we might see is I think we're going to see, and this is something I've mentioned before at the start of the season, some more about Rutherford and his backstory. So I don't think what was tossed out at the end of the final episode of last season is going to be forgotten. I think at some point that is going to be taken up again.
I think so too. At least yeah. They can't just tease us like that, and I think given the sophistication of the writers who are very funny but are very serious about their craft, I think that this was not a throwaway. This is going to come back at some point, and we are going to talk about that again.
So, Josh, let me ask you a question offhand, which is kind of a long range theory that branches outside the show a bit. But I wanted to ask you before we leave, what did you think of Star Trek Day?
I loved it. I was really glad to see some of the upcoming stuff for Lower Decks. The new Picard trailer does have me excited, but I'm a little bit guarded about it. But I do want to be genuinely excited, but from what I saw of it. I was a little bit disappointed we didn't see more about Prodigy and Discovery, or and then we were teased about some possible announcements about future shows, but I guess that was too much to hope for. However, I will say the thing I did love most about Star Trek Day, the tribute to Nichelle Nichols. There have been a few of those already in the past few weeks, but this I think was the best one. Having all the ladies of Star Trek, especially Ladies of Color and Kate Mulgrew, um, talking about how Nichelle impacted their lives, and how important a part of the series she was. That she really was the heart of Star Trek, and she is well missed. So sorry.
No, no, no. That's great. I like the most the 2 or 3 minutes clip we got of the next season of Strange New Worlds because we
Oh,
get to see that Laan is back. I
yes.
mean, aside from the fact that I felt for Ortegas because he was so excited to be able to finally go down to the ship to the planet because he's right. Like who doesn't get to go down often? It's the pilot. Like the pilot's got to stay up and for the ship. As he's so excited, but that brief view in the corridor that Laan's back. This is a good thing. Not that we didn't expect it, but it's nice to get confirmed that C will be back.
Yes. You know, I am excited that she will be coming back. Um, I'm excited. Well, I mean, I anything with Strange New Worlds, I'm excited about right now. It's Star Trek in general. Um, but yeah, I love Ortega. Okay, she is outside of every. She's become one of my favorite characters. I love her spunk. I love her attitude. I was really happy watching the clip of her getting all suited up, putting on the funny hat and everything, and getting ready to go down and pilot the shuttlecraft. And yeah, oh man, that was so. I felt her disappointment because I too would have been excited to be on the away team and go down with Captain Pike and everybody, but not yet. We're blocked here a little bit, but keep our fingers crossed for Ortega, and and looking forward to that. Of course, we are looking forward to the big crossover between Strange New Worlds and Lower Decks. That's going to be so sweet, having one episode animated and one episode live action, of these two crews together. And obviously, I think personally, the two strongest shows of Star Trek right now. I mean, I love everything Star Trek, but these two are kind of my favorites. So going forward. So
Well, with that, I think we're at the end of our show.
yes.
And if we want to plug ourselves and anything that we know that's happening nearby in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, I think this is the moment to do it. Joss, if you'd like to lead us.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Well, right now, the Star Trek Meetup group, which I am head of, Northern Virginia Star Trek Meetup. We are always looking for new members. Next week, we'll be going to visit the Utzvar Hazy Museum near Dulles. If anyone would like to sign up and join us, you can find us at meetup.org. We will be going to see a lot of very wonderful aircraft, including the space shuttle Discovery, which is always really exciting. I'm always in awe of seeing her because this thing has actually been in outer space. So that's something to look forward to. Also, my book Bigfoot and Other Tales of the Supernatural is still available on Amazon and Kindle, and that's kind of what I got going on right now. Chris, what do you got for us?
Thank you, Josh. So, lots of things happening this upcoming weekend. This weekend, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, we will have NostalgiaCon at the Hunt Valley. Um, and we will have several Star Trek guests from the original series. We have Nancy Kovacs, who some of you may associate the name also with several movies in the late 60s, early 70s, including Westworld. We'll have Beverly Washburn, and although not part of Star Trek itself, but part a voice of Batgirl in Batman the Animated Series, Melissa Gilbert will be there. So if you have some time, Thursday, Friday, or Saturday, head on down to the Hunt Valley Inn in Hunt Valley, Maryland, to go to NostalgiaCon. And then on Saturday, we will have the Small Press Expo, which is a personal favorite of mine. It's being held at the Marriott at White Flint and Metro accessible. And it is back after 2 years, 3 years, I guess now, of not being with us. So if you're looking for something to do next weekend that does not involve going to the Udvar Hazy, you have your choice of NostalgiaCon or you have your choice of Small Press Expo. And if you want to see pictures of what happened at either, please feel free to go to my Instagram. It's Verde Cosplay, and you'll be able to keep up with the latest of what's happening. And also come back next week for the show, where I can also share what happened at either show. And with that, peace and long life. Good luck on the start of your fantasy seasons.
Kablah!